Let me start on a very somber note. I hope it'll end up being a liberating reflection. You'll have to judge. GDP is slowing all over the world, everywhere. And the reason is productivity has been declining for 20 years all over the world. The result, unemployment's very high everywhere. And nowhere is it more pronounced than among the millennial generation coming into the workforce. Our economists tell us that we can look forward to slow productivity and slow growth for the next 20 years. And let me do the math for you. At the end of two industrial revolutions in the 19th and 20th century, here's the equation. We have to admit that half the human race is far better off today than our ancestors were before we began this industrial experiment. Granted? Also, we need to acknowledge that 40% of the human race are making $2 a day or less, and arguably they are worse off than their ancestors were before the industrial experiment. And the final equation, the industrial era, while it's benefited half the human race and been a detriment to the other half of the human race, the well-off, the very wealthy, have done quite well. Today, the 62 wealthiest human beings in the world, we could put them in this little section of the room. The 62 wealthiest human beings in the world today, their combined wealth equals the accumulated wealth of 1/2 the human population living on Earth. 3.5 billion people. There's something really dysfunctional about the way the human family is organizing its economic relationships on this Earth. It's clear we're in a long-term structural economic crisis at the end of the Second Industrial Revolution. But now this industrial era has given rise to a much more profound crisis, an environmental crisis. We have spewed massive amounts of CO2 and methane and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere of this planet to create this industrial way of life. And now we have so much CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide in the atmosphere that it's blocking the sun's heat from getting off the Earth. We are in real-time climate change. This is no longer a theory. This is no longer looming on the horizon. This is no longer imminent. Climate change is now at the house, in the door. What's terrifying about climate change, and unfortunately it's never explained, because if it were explained, our human family would be justifiably terrified and motivated and driven to begin to transform this planet. Climate change changes the water cycles of the Earth. That's what this is all about. It's never explained. We're the watery planet. Our satellite probes go to other planets, and what's the first thing we look for? Water. No water, not interested. Recently, they discovered what they think is dirty water on Mars, and everybody is thrilled. Our ecosystems on Earth have developed over millions of years based on the water cycles, the cloud cycles that traverse them across the Earth. For every 1 degree that the temperature of the planet goes up because of industrial-induced CO2 emissions, for every 1 degree that the temperature goes up on this planet, the atmosphere is actually sucking up 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat is forcing the precipitation into the clouds, so we're getting more concentrated precipitation, more violent water events, but they're more infrequent, throwing the entire water cycle of the Earth off kilter. More blockbuster winter snows. 8 feet in Boston that last season, my gosh. More dramatic spring floods. That flood in the Carolinas, remember? They said this flood only will occur once every 1,000 years. It's the new normal. More prolonged summer droughts. My wife and I were in British Columbia, and we're coming into Vancouver, and the pilot says, we have some smoke coming in. And I turned to my wife and I said, he means smog. No, he meant smoke. Wildfires from British Columbia to California. Summer drought and wildfire. We have Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes now, so dramatic that they're destroying infrastructure and killing people all over the world. That hurricane that hit the Philippines, this was the most powerful hurricane ever recorded. This is the new normal. What I'm saying here is that climate change is dramatically changing the water cycles. They're on an exponential curve. This is absolutely frightening. It's terrifying. And if you are a young millennial about to start a family, if you're a parent here or a grandparent, I want you to listen to this. Our scientists now tell us that we are in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth. It doesn't even make the headlines. This is the most dramatic story the human family has ever faced. There have been 5 mass extinction events on Earth in 450 million years, and each time, the chemistry of the planet shifts very quickly. There's what we call a turning point and massive die-out. And after the massive die-out of life, it takes upwards of 10 million years to get new life back on Earth. Our scientists now tell us we are in the 6th extinction event. This is not a model, we're chronicling it in real time. And what they're saying is that over the next 7 decades, and many of you will be around for a lot of that, and your children will. In the next 7 decades, we could lose over half the species of life that now inhabit this little oasis in the universe. As my wife says, we just are not grasping the enormity of this moment. We might acknowledge climate change, but we're going on as business as usual with a little greenwashing. 99.5% of all the species that have ever been on this planet have come and gone. Those are not good odds. And what's interesting is human beings, we're the actual youngest species. We're the babies. Anatomically modern humans have only been here about 200,000 years. There's no guarantee we're going to make this. And the new studies that have just come out, they're even more terrifying because they're seeing the freshwater melts in the Arctic now, in Greenland, and now in Antarctica much quicker than we expected, changing the ocean currents. And they're talking about storms that are beyond anything we can imagine that we've ever seen in human history by the end of this century. Talking about the major coastal cities where much of our urban population is underwater. This is not a century from now. This is in the lifetime of many young people who are 4 and 5 now and will be my age when we're in full steam into this new era, this abyss. So what do? We need a new economic vision for the world. It has to be compelling. We need a game plan to deploy that vision, and it needs to be quick. It needs to move as quickly in the developing countries as in the industrialized nations. If we have any chance of arresting the worst of this climate change, we're going to have to be off carbon in 4 decades, everywhere. This is beyond anything we're talking about at global conferences. How do we begin to tackle something of this magnitude? We need to step back and reflect on how the great economic paradigm shifts in history occur. If we know how they occur, we're going to get a roadmap here in this room and around the world, and we're going to get a compass that will allow us to navigate a new journey, to completely transform the way we handle life on Earth. There have been at least 7 major economic paradigm shifts in history, and they're very interesting anthropologically because they share a common denominator. And that is, at a certain moment in time, 3 technologies emerge and converge to create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform. That's a fancy way of saying a new infrastructure that fundamentally changes the way we manage, power, and move economic life. What are those 3 technologies? First, new communication technologies to allow us to more efficiently manage our economic activity. Second, new sources of energy to allow us to more efficiently power our economic activity. And third, new modes of mobility, transportation and logistics, to allow us to more efficiently move the economic activity. So when communication revolutions join with new energy regimes and new modes of transportation, it does change the way we manage, power, and move economic life. It changes temporal spatial orientation. It changes our habitats. It allows us to integrate in larger units. It actually even changes consciousness and governance. Let me give you two examples. First Industrial Revolution, 19th century. Second Industrial Revolution, 20th century. The Brits took us into the First Industrial Revolution. And first, there was a communication revolution. They invented steam-powered printing. No more manual print presses. Steam-powered printing was a big leap forward because it allowed us to mass-produce very cheap print quickly. Then, in the second half of the 19th century, the Brits lay out a telegraph system across the British Isles. Steam-powered printing and the telegraph, those communication technologies then converged with a completely new source of energy in Britain called coal. But how were they going to take that coal and harvest it? They invented the steam engine. Now, this is ingenious. They figured out that they should put the steam engine on rails for locomotives, national transport, and logistics. Urban life, the Industrial Revolution, steam power. Second Industrial Revolution, the United States. Centralized electricity, and especially the telephone. I know we think the internet's a big deal, but the telephone was a really big deal. All of a sudden, people could communicate at vast distances at the speed of light. Later, radio and television. These communication technologies converged in the United States with a completely new energy source, cheap Texas oil. Then Henry Ford put everybody on the road with cars, buses, and trucks. Second Industrial Revolution changed the way we manage, power, and move economic life. That Second Industrial Revolution took us through the 20th century. It took the whole world through the 20th century, and it peaked in July 2008.
All right, welcome back to the show here. Oil to 147. We went.
Remember that month? In that month, Brent crude oil hit a record price of $147 on world markets. And when it hit that record price, the whole global economy shut down, silenced, completely gone. That was the economic earthquake. The collapse of the financial market 60 days later was the aftershock.
Mayhem, carnage, a bloodbath. Call it what you want, but what we saw on global stock markets today was ill-disguised panic.
Good evening. This was the day after what may someday be called Black Monday on Wall Street because it was perhaps the worst financial collapse since the Great Depression.
Our policy leaders are still dealing with the aftershock, not the earthquake. Why was it the earthquake? Because the entire industrial revolution that we've gone through is all dependent on the carbon deposits of a previous period in history. You know, if we look back, let's say that we make it through this next period of history. I always wonder, what will future generations think of us maybe in 100,000 years from now? And they'll say, oh yes, we remember them. There was the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. These were the fossil fuel people. They dug up the burial grounds of the Carboniferous era and created a short-lived, dramatic, and very dangerous civilization. It's all about fossil fuels. Our fertilizers and pesticides are made out of fossil fuels. Our construction materials are made out of fossil fuels. Most of our pharmaceutical products are made out of fossil fuels. Our synthetic fiber, our power, our transport, our heat and light's all moved by fossil fuels. So when the price of oil goes over around 95 a barrel, all the other prices go up. When we get into the zone of around 115 a barrel, prices become so high that purchasing power slows. This is the sunset of a great industrial era. Now, you remember in 2009, oil went down to 50 a barrel because the economy had shut down. There was no activity. In 2010, we tried to regrow inventories, so oil prices started to go up. All the other prices started to go up. And in 2014, we hit a new peak of 114 or 15 a barrel. Purchasing power slowed down again. This is a convulsion of growth, shutdown, growth, shutdown. And the only reason oil went down in the last few years to 30 a barrel is now the fossil fuel industry is fighting among themselves in the sunset. OPEC said, we're going to keep the oil spigot open. We're going to flood the world with oil. And that's going to take the price down to 30 a barrel and wipe out our new competitors, the more exotic fossil fuels, shale gas in the US, tar sands in Canada. And guess what? They wiped them out. Only took a year and a half. Bankruptcies across the United States in the shale gas industry. And now tar sands in Canada, the pipeline's not happening. And do you hear anybody talking about energy independent right now? It's over. And as soon as the bankruptcies complete themselves, the oil prices are now starting to go back up. But now we have failed states. Where there's oil production, we have failed states. So this is a volatile, convulsive sunset over the next 40 to 50 years, an unstable world. Where do we head from here? Let me share an anecdote. When Angela Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first couple of weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy on her watch. Now remember, in terms of per capita, Germany is the most robust capitalist market economy in the world. When I got to Berlin, the first question I asked the new chancellor, I said, Madam Chancellor, how are you going to grow the German economy when your businesses are plugged into a platform, an infrastructure of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion road, rail, water, and air transport, and that infrastructure peaked in its productivity in Germany years ago? Let me talk about productivity. This is crucial. Our economists are lamenting, they're asking, why has productivity been declining for 20 years? We have all these new killer products coming out of Silicon Valley. Why is productivity declining? I'm going to share with you a dirty little secret in economics that economists don't like to talk about. We used to believe that there are two factors that drive productivity in standard economic theory: better machines and better performing workers. But when Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize for economic growth theory in the mid-1980s, he actually let the little secret out. He said, we've got a problem here. When we trace every single year of the Industrial Revolution, these two factors, better machines, better workers, it only accounts for about 14% of the productivity. So Robert Solow asked the big question, where's the other 86% of productivity come from? Don't know. Moses Abramowitz, the former head of the American Economic Association, said, quote, this is a measure of our ignorance. Now, wouldn't you think economists would know where productivity comes from because that's the basis of the discipline? Here's why they don't know. When classical economic theory was penned in the late 1700s, the vogue was Newton's physics. Newton was the big guy in town. Everybody wanted to use Newton's metaphor so they could be more scientific because he had discovered the laws that run the universe, supposedly. The economists also fell in line. For example, you know Newton's law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction? Adam Smith borrowed that metaphor for his invisible hand of supply and demand. For every action on the supply side, there's an equal and opposite reaction on the demand side. Newton's law, a body in motion stays in motion unless disrupted. Baptists say borrowed that metaphor, the French economist. And he suggested that, well, supply will stimulate demand, which will generate supply, which will stimulate demand unless disrupted. All of our economic theory, if you go back and take a look at it, it's all based on Newton's metaphors in physics. There's only one problem with this. Newton's physics has absolutely nothing to do with economics. Nothing. Nothing. Economics is governed by the same laws that govern the universe, the solar system, the biosphere on Earth, and every single thing you and I do in our economic life while we're here on this planet. Here are the two laws that govern everything in the universe, including our economy. The first law of energy says, all the energy in the universe is constant since the Big Bang. No new energy has been created, no energy has been destroyed since the Big Bang. That's the conservation law. The second law of energy says that's true, that the energy isn't created or destroyed, but it always changes form, but only in one direction. From concentrated, the Big Bang, to dispersed through the galaxies. From hot to cooled off through the galaxies. From order to disorder, from available to unavailable. Entropy is a measure of the energy that's still there, but not available to do useful work. There are three systems that we can talk about in thermodynamics. An open system that exchanges matter and energy with the outside world. A closed system which exchanges energy with the outside world, but doesn't exchange matter. And an isolated system which doesn't exchange matter or energy with the outside world. The Earth, in relation to the solar system and sun, is B. We get plenty of energy for the sun. We don't have to worry about this for billions of years. But in terms of the fixed matter on this planet, we don't have a lot of additional matter coming down here. We get a few meteorites, a little cosmic dust, but whatever we have in terms of fixed matter, which is a form of energy, has been here since we blew off the sun and cooled off. All of you have smartphones on you right now, and there are little granules of rare earths in those phones. They've been here since the Earth has been here. That's a form of energy. It's a material form. So, here's what economics is all about. We extract low entropy, available energy in nature, a rare earth, a metallic ore, a fossil fuel. We extract it, and then through our value chains, we store it, we ship it, we produce goods and services from it, we consume it, we recycle it back to nature. Those are value chains. At every step of conversion, when we take nature's resources and move it through society, at every step of conversion, we have to embed energy into that good or service to get it to the next stage of what it becomes. But we lose some energy in the process of that conversion. This is called aggregate efficiency in economics. Aggregate efficiency is the ratio of the potential work versus the actual useful work you actually embed in the good or service. Let me give you an example. Nature has the same economic conditions that we have in our human economy. If a lion chases down an antelope in the wild, then kills it, about 10 to 20% of the total energy that's in that antelope gets embedded into the lion. The rest is heat loss in the conversion. That's the aggregate efficiency. What does this have to do with my conversation with the Chancellor of Germany? She's a physicist, you know, by background. So here's what I said to her. We started the second industrial revolution in 1905 in the United States with 3% aggregate efficiency. Every conversion of nature's resources through the value chains, we lost about 97%. It didn't get into the product or service. By 1990, the US got up to about 14% aggregate efficiency. That was our ceiling. Nothing's changed since then. And I reported to the Chancellor that Germany got up to about 18.5% aggregate efficiency. That was their ceiling. Nothing's changed. Anybody want to guess which country led the world in aggregate efficiency? Japan. 20% aggregate efficiency, 1990s, reached its ceiling. What I'm saying to the Chancellor is this. You can have market reforms, labor reforms, monetary reforms. You can create incentives for killer new products. You can try to create 1 million Steve Jobs. It won't make a damn bit of difference. If your businesses are still plugged in to a second industrial revolution infrastructure, you can't get above the ceiling of 20% aggregate efficiency anywhere in the world. Why is this important? A new generation of economists who happen to study physics have gone back and looked at the industrial record, and they added a third factor to productivity. Better machines, better workers, aggregate efficiency. The ratio of yes, it's so obvious, the ratio of potential to useful work. When they put in that third factor, it accounts for much of the rest of productivity. Henry Ford could have told you this. In fact, every engineer could have told you this. Every architect could have told you this. Every biologist could have told you this. Every chemist could have told you this. They all have to start their training in school by learning these two laws of energy that govern the universe. I teach in the oldest business school in the world. I taught the advanced management program at the Wharton School for 15 years. Not a single business school in the world today, right now, requires that you learn about the first and second laws of thermodynamics that govern economic activity. How shameful is this? So in that first day with the chancellor, we discussed the third industrial revolution, a new convergence of communication, energy, and transportation to manage, power, and move Germany. At the end of the day, in a private session, the chancellor said, Mr. Rifkin, we will have this third industrial revolution here in Germany. The communication internet is now matured. It's been 25 years since the World Wide Web. We have digitalized communication. Now this communication internet is converging with a nascent, digitalized, renewable energy internet. And now both those internets are converging with a fledgling, automated, GPS, and very soon driverless road, rail, water, and air transport internet to create three internets: communication internet, renewable energy internet, automated transportation logistic internet, one super internet to manage, power, and move economic life. These three internets ride on top of a platform called the Internet of Things. We're embedding sensors in all of our devices, as you know, so they can monitor real-time activity and then talk to other machines and talk to us. So we have sensors now in the agricultural fields, and they're actually monitoring the growth of crops, the soil salinity, the moisture in the crops, et cetera, and they're sending that data. We have sensors now in the factories that are monitoring our economic data. We have sensors in smart homes, monitoring how the energy is used in our buildings. We have sensors in smart vehicles, warehouses, smart roads, all of them collecting data. But where does that big data go? It goes to communication, energy, and transport internets to manage, power, and move economic life. As this new system comes in, it's going to be ubiquitous by 2030, connecting everything with everyone. We are essentially creating an external prothesis, a distributed nervous system, that's going to allow everyone on this planet at very low cost to begin directly engaging each other on a global Internet of Things and bypassing a lot of the vertical integrated organization and middlemen that kept us away from each other. We can have direct engagement now. This is the revolution. This evens the playing field. There's been a long discussion among the millennials. You started this Occupy movement, saying, what about the 1%, the 99%? Now we have a new platform. The Internet of Things platform is of a different nature than the platforms in the first and second industrial revolution. The new platform is really radical because this third industrial revolution platform is designed to be distributed, not centralized. It works best when it's collaborative and open and transparent rather than closed and proprietary. And the benefits come when more and more people join the network and each of us contributes our talents, which benefits the network and then benefits us. It's designed to be laterally scaled, not vertically integrated. And this is what moves us from the 1% and the 99% to a vast, vast expansion of social entrepreneurialism in global networks. That's the upside. On the other hand, how do we deal with network neutrality? How do we ensure that everyone has equal access to this new Internet of Things platform, this third industrial revolution? How do we make sure governments don't purloin this platform for political purposes, already beginning? How do we make sure that giant monopoly companies, some of them on the internet, don't use that data for their own commercial purposes at our expense? How do we ensure privacy when everyone's connected? How do we ensure data security when everyone's connected? How do we prevent cybercrime and cyber terrorism that could disrupt the system and take it down when everyone's connected? This is the dark net. And what I'm saying to you today is that the dark net is as impressive as the opportunity of the bright net. And I would say that the next 3 generations, beginning with you and your children and grandchildren, you're going to be heavily engaged in a new political movement, and that movement's going to be to ensure against the dark net prevailing and making sure that we all have equal access so the human family can engage in a distributed nervous system and begin to have a vast expansion of social entrepreneurialism. This is the political struggle that starts with the millennials, your children and grandchildren. This is an uphill battle. This is not a cakewalk. I'm not a technological determinist, and I'm not a utopian. Technology just enables, and then the question is, how will that journey end? It's a big question mark right now. But let's assume, for the sake of this afternoon, that we're going to be able to deal with all the complexities of the dark net, and it's a big challenge. Here's what this Internet of Things platform provides. Let's say here at Brooklyn, you're a SME, a small and medium-sized enterprise, or a cooperative, or a nonprofit. You can go up on this nascent Internet of Things platform that's already emerging. It's not theoretical. And you can have a transparent picture of all the economic data flowing through the world if it stays network neutral. The power here is enormous. We think Snowden was a big deal. Now all the economic data is going to be open to everyone, not just a few government secrets. But in a network neutral world, you're going to be able to go up on this platform and have a completely transparent picture of all the data. You can go up on the platform and cut your big data on your value chain out from the noise. Then you can mine your big data with analytics. Then you can create your own algorithms and apps that will allow you to dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency at every step of conversion on your value chain. And as you do that, dramatically increase your productivity, dramatically reduce your ecological footprint, and dramatically plunge your marginal cost. Some of those marginal costs are going to get so low, they head to zero marginal cost. And when they hit near zero marginal cost, it gives rise to a completely new economic system. In economic theory, the optimum market is where you sell at marginal cost. Marginal cost is after fixed cost. Once you pay for whatever the technology is, the marginal cost is what it costs to produce a unit. Classical economic theory, we've always said that the most optimum market is where you sell at marginal cost. Here's the problem. We never expected a technology revolution, digital revolution, that would be so powerful in its potential productivity that could actually reduce the marginal cost for some goods and services to near zero, meaning there's no longer a profit margin, and you can produce goods and services for each other beyond the market in the sharing economy for nearly free. This sharing economy didn't come out of the blue. Capitalism gave birth to this sharing economy. Let me be clear. As muddy as the sharing economy is, it's the first new economic system to enter onto the world stage since capitalism and socialism in the 19th century. It's a remarkable historical event. This is already happening. Zero marginal cost phenomenon is not theoretical. It's been how many years since Napster, the file sharing service? About 17 years? 17 years. Well, this little file sharing service started a revolution. We have 3 billion people right now on the internet, and now the Internet of Things, who are actually producing and sharing virtual goods at near zero marginal cost beyond the market, disrupting entire industries. We have young people that are producing their own music. And what does it cost to have a little technology, a little machine that allows you studio quality music when you want to record in your home? And then whether you send that music to one person on the web or a billion, it's zero marginal cost. You just need a service provider, keep your power up. I was surprised when that Korean performance artist a couple years ago, 1 billion people went to his website, zero marginal cost. We have millions of young people any given day who are producing their own YouTube videos. Take a little video, put it up on the web, 1 billion people can see it, zero marginal cost. We have people producing their own news blogs and social media, near zero marginal cost. We have millions of people contributing to Wikipedia and constructing the knowledge of the world and a nonprofit website for free. This is the most improbable experiment I could ever imagine. I don't know how Jimmy Wales came up with this. I would have said this cannot succeed. Adam Smith said each individual pursues their own self-interest and never cares about the public good. But in pursuing their self-interest and not giving a damn about the public good, by pursuing their self-interest, the society is better off. I always thought it was a little dubious, but that's how we grew up. But apparently, none of the millennials have read Adam Smith. Because, for example, in Wikipedia, you're all freely giving your talent, putting things up on Wikipedia, constructing the knowledge of the world. You democratized knowledge in less than 15 years, and the accuracy is... Now, book publishing. What's happening? People are creating their own free ebooks. My new book came out on the Pirate Bays before we could publish in our languages, and God bless them, they were ranking it before Amazon could even touch it. We have 6 million college students taking massive open online college courses taught by the best professors at the best universities. They're getting college credits. It's free. You can't win here. You millennials have won. Unless we outlaw all the technology, we've got to find a way to live with it and find value with it. Entire industries have been disrupted in the 17 years since Napster. The music industry has shrunk. Television has declined because everyone's producing their own YouTube videos. You're all producers, sharing with each other. Newspapers and magazines have gone out of business with social blogs, but thousands of new enterprises have emerged. Not just Google, Facebook, and Twitter, all of these are new, but thousands of startup enterprises, profit and nonprofit. They're creating the platforms. They're creating the apps. They're creating the connectivity. They're using the analytics and the data. It's a revolution. Well, we thought there'd be a firewall here. And certainly we could understand how zero marginal cost brought on by digitalization would affect the virtual world, but we didn't think it would move over the firewall to the physical world. What I'm saying with the zero marginal cost society is that firewall is broken now. It's called the Internet of Things, completely gone. We have millions of people now producing their own renewable energy right now at near zero marginal cost, free. And now as we move to car sharing and as we move to driverless transportation, we're going to see the marginal cost plunge toward near zero in transport and logistics in the next 20 years. Let's go back to Germany. What's happened in the 10 years since that first conversation with the Chancellor? We are now in Germany at 32% of all of the electricity powering Germany now is solar and wind, right now, in 10 years. And this is a northern country, doesn't have a lot of sun. We're going to be 35% of the electricity solar and wind by 2020. We're going to be 100% renewable energy by 2040. Absolutely. And what's interesting is the fixed cost of introducing the solar technology and the wind turbines and the geothermal heat pumps. Solar and wind are on an exponential curve, just like computers. When I was a kid in the 1940s and 50s, there's only a few computers. They cost millions of dollars. And the chairman of IBM at the time said, we probably will need a total of 7 computers. Maybe 7. And this was an optimistic forecast. We did not anticipate exponential curves in computer chips, Moore's law. So all of a sudden, Intel figures out that their engineers are doubling the capacity on that chip every 2 years. This is still going on. So even if you're making $2 a day, everyone's going to be connected to the Internet of Things within less than 15 to 20 years. And the fixed costs are going to be as cheap as your cell phones in 20 years. Everyone's going to produce their own green electricity. These exponential curves are not going away. You know how much a solar watt used to cost? $78 to generate 1 watt solar in 1978. You know how much it costs to generate a solar watt today? Not $78, 50 cents. It's going to be 35 cents in 18 months from now. This is really moving quick. And this is what you're not told here in the United States by the energy companies. We have power and utility companies, some of them in my group, global group, and they're quietly, right now, buying long-term 20-year contracts for solar and wind electricity in Europe and America, quietly, right now, for 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And the Berkeley National Labs, government labs just announced they're generating wind and solar. I think it's somewhere between 2.8 and 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. It's over, actually, for fossil fuel and nuclear. And the next big bubble, I will tell you now, is going to be the $100 trillion in stranded assets in the fossil fuel industry. This is going to make the subprime mortgage look like the small-time game. Because we're moving toward parity, and then solar and wind are getting cheaper and cheaper. That's what's going on behind the scenes right now. But what's interesting in Germany, once you pay the fixed cost for your solar panel and wind turbine, the marginal cost of producing the energy in Germany today is zero. The sun has not sent us a bill in Germany. The wind hasn't invoiced us. The geothermal heat has not come to us with a bill. It's free. So what happens when German businesses can plug in to a communication internet that then converges with an energy internet, and we digitalize the electricity grid so everyone can produce their own solar and wind and either use it off-grid or sell it back to the grid? What happens when companies plug in to an energy internet where the cost of the energy is near zero marginal cost? Think about when they have to move across their value chain, and at each step of conversion on their value chain, their energy cost is near zero. How does any second industrial revolution country compete with that? And it's not big Germany only. Little Denmark's done this. Anybody can do this. Who's producing all the new energy? In Germany, there are 4 major power companies: EnBW, RWE, E.ON, and Vattenfall, these giant global vertically integrated companies. And frankly, we thought they were invincible. What's happened to them in 10 years is what happened to the music industry, television, newspapers, magazine, and book publishing. Thousands of small players have come together in electricity cooperatives, farmers, small businesses, neighborhood associations. All of them went to the banks and got loans, these electricity cooperatives, and every bank was completely fine about giving them the loans. Why? Because they knew that the energy they generated would get a premium price when they sell it back to the market. Nobody was turned down. They're creating all the new energy. This is power to the people, literally and figuratively power to the people. What happened to the big 4 power companies? They're producing less than 7% of the new power, and they acknowledge they're out of the game. Why? To their credit, they were the most efficient means to produce and distribute centralized power, fossil fuel and nuclear power, vertical integration. But the new energies, they require millions of small players connecting where they are and collecting. You have to collect the sun everywhere in little amounts, and the wind everywhere where you are, and the geothermal heat everywhere where it is, and rewards cooperatives who laterally scale and join together in networks. Big companies can't put all these players together. The players come together in their own regions, the cooperatives, and they join together. It is power to the people. Does this mean this is the end of the energy companies? Not necessarily. Many will go out of business. Some will not. About 7 years ago, the E.ON, one of the giant 4 companies, asked if I would debate their chairman, Mr. Tyson, but in a neutral country, the Netherlands. We had a 3-hour debate. And I said to him, look, you're not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow morning, but you also have to be in the third industrial revolution tomorrow morning, because you have a 25, 30-year transition to get from the second to the third and find new value. And I said, in the new system, it operates quite differently than the old system. In the new third industrial revolution, you make more money by selling less and less and less electricity. I said, what you do is you set up partnerships with thousands of enterprises, and you help manage the energy flow through their value chains. You help them with their big data. You help them mine that big data with the analytics. You help them with their algorithms and apps, dramatically increase their productivity. In return, those thousands of enterprises will share their gains back with the power companies. It's called performance contracts. We're now doing it. Guess what? Last year, the chairman of E.ON, took him 7 years. They're moving to renewable energies, and they want to help manage parts of the energy internet with energy services. EDF, the great nuclear power in France, has joined our group. We're doing the whole build-out of the third industrial revolution in parts of Europe, in northern France, the Netherlands, Luxembourg. And EDF said, we're with you. They're on the ground helping lay this out. They're not leaving nuclear tomorrow, but they see that the handwriting's on the wall. So the companies that don't go there, we don't need them. It's not just Europe, now China. When President Xi came into power with Premier Li announced that and I was pleased, he announced he had read my book, The Third Industrial Revolution. He put out a public announcement. I'd never met him. I'd never even been to China. And he instructed the central government of China to begin looking at these themes that I'm laying out to you to move China to a third industrial revolution. They're mindful in China. They lost the whole first industrial revolution. They missed almost all the second industrial revolution and came in the tail in the last 10 years. And they said, we're not going to lose the third industrial revolution. We want to collaborate with the third industrial revolution. And they said, quote, be among the leaders. To show you how fast they move. I've been shuttling back and forth, but after the first visit, it was about 11 weeks later, the chairman of the state grid, which is the largest electricity grid in the world, announced an $82 billion 4-year commitment to digitalize the Chinese grid so that millions of Chinese people could produce their own solar and wind in their local communities and share it back on an energy internet. That started this year. Yeah. Watch Europe, watch China.